Good evening and welcome to our PGCE More Than Teaching webinar. I'm your host and I'm the PGCE Program Coordinator for SACAP. We welcome you at our webinar tonight. And I am pleased to present to you and introduce to you our speakers for the evening. First up, we'll have Dr. Frederick Sylvester, a lecturer and educational psychologist at the Faculty of the University of the Western Cape. He is also a registered educational psychologist with the PGCE. Next, we will have Megan Naude. She's an educational psychologist and have extensive experience working both in the public and private sector, and she's currently running her own private practice in Cape Town. She has vast experience working with children and young people facing a variety of challenges such as learning difficulties, emotional and social challenges. Our next speaker will be Sarah Capstick-Dale. She is an educator and currently working as an editor in with educational content. Sarah is a UCT graduate with a bachelor's in art in English and film and media studies. Our next speaker will be Marion Erskine. Marion is a traveler of the world. He graduated from the Northwest University with a BA degree in 1998 with Afrikaans, Dutch, and English as his main subjects. He passed his higher education diploma, cum laude, and won the ATKV prize for the best subject, didactics. Currently, Marion is living abroad, and he will tell you more about his journey after PGCE. Our last speaker, but not the least, will be our program head for the Postgraduate Certificate in Education, and he will tell you more about our PGCE program at SACAP. With further ado, I introduce Dr. Frederick Sylvester.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Dr. Sylvester, and I'll be speaking to you about a very important subject, which also alludes itself to the topic of this evening. It's the important subject, life orientation. Now, life orientation itself is a subject that came about based on the preamble of our Constitution. And the Constitution, as you all know, is the highest law of the country. And if a subject is based on something so powerful, why is it not being given the substance that it should be given as it is there to correct and heal the atrocities of the past, also to bring about social justice and to join our nation as one? So this is the main aim of the subject life orientation and why it came about. It is a compulsory subject. Now, if we look at the subject life orientation, it is also a subject that covers the entire spectrum of the individual. It is holistic development of the individual learner. So therefore, a psychology background would be a very good starting point if you're thinking of doing a PGCE, because you're going to need that psychology to guide you as to how to identify the behaviors that manifest in the classroom, but then also to find ways in which to approach these and guide the learner, hopefully, to a better way of dealing with it. So therefore, with psychology, I would say you are able to take the individual child's context and weave that or into the content of the curriculum, and thereby reach the child, but also use the subject as a cathartic process to heal that child sitting full of trauma, and in that way help the learner to come to terms with many of the traumas that they're exposed to in their daily lives. And therefore, for me as a life orientation teacher, you have to have cognizance of the child's context. And therefore, the context in which you're going to teach plays a vitally important role in the subject life orientation, because you should be able to identify not only the child's strengths, but also the weaknesses and how these are affected by the context in which they're living and what they're exposed to on a daily basis. And as you all know, our learners are exposed to so many atrocities out there, which really places them in a situation where they're not able to learn. And of course, they will act out and behaviors will become one of those things that you have to deal with in the classroom. Now, the subject life orientation has always been seen as the stepchild of the education system, but it is such an important component of the education system. If we go back to the Constitution, if you look at what we ought to be doing, what is the main proponent of life orientation? As we said earlier on, the holistic development of the child. What are we looking at? We're looking at developing the child socially, emotionally, physically, cognitively. So you must be able to take that individual child and look at the strengths, but also the weaknesses, and weave it together and see how you can make this child to function at his or her or their optimum. So when we look at this, we say that when we're working within life orientation situation, you should be aware of your own shortcomings. I always say, to be a psychologist or to be a person working with other people, you have to take stock of yourself, because you must be aware of your own weaknesses and in such a way your triggers. Because when you work with people, you've got to put that aside and work specifically with that individual. And this is where the life orientation teachers start. Your training should start by taking cognizance or stock of yourself. I always say you've got to make contact with that wounded child within inside of you. And then you've got to find ways in which to nurture that wounded child. And it's only by nurturing that wounded child will you be able to have the strength and the ability to take on other people's wounded children and guide them through that. So this is an important aspect when working with young people or with children or with individuals. So what do we do in life orientation? First of all, we alert learners about their strengths, like I said. We guide them to make informed decisions based on their strengths. We also look at attitudes towards allo and how they can incorporate that into their daily lives. And the important thing about allo for me, if I know the context, at the end of the lesson, the learner must be able to have a take-home word or concept that I can then weave into when I get home, how can I use that to strengthen my ability to function within those challenging environments? So that is an important component. So you as the life orientation teacher has a pivotal role in guiding that learner to function optimally on all levels of the education system. It's also a fun subject because you can make it your own. As long as you stay within your curriculum, but you can take those individual concepts that you have to teach and make it your own and teach it in a fun, playful manner that will attract the learners to the subject instead of the way in which it's done in some schools where it's just seen as, it's just a fly-by or whatever, come-by subject. We don't have to really put much emphasis on it. Unfortunately, that has changed. The subject life orientation is now being given the same status as your STEM subjects, your maths and science. And it's by high time. And this was also mentioned at the prize giving of the best life orientation teachers in the province on Friday evening with all of the Western Cape people there, where they said that they are so proud to say that after all these years, they've won the battle to say we can now equate the subject life orientation in its presentation on the same level as maths and science. Also, what they're hoping to do is to find schools where the person teaching life orientation, if they're not a specialist, they will be replaced by life orientation specialists. So opening up the teaching or the employment possibilities of life orientation teachers. So when we look at the subject life orientation, we look at different subject areas or focus areas on the different levels. The important thing, people, life orientation or life skills, as it's known in the grade foundation phase from Naude to grade 6, and then from 7 to 12, it's called life orientation, but it's all the same. We're all trying to build that individual child, to make them aware of their strengths and weaknesses, but also to place them within a value system conducive to the society or the communities in which we live. So the first thing is we look at the development of the self, your own personal growth and development, and you as the teacher, you've got to guide these learners in how to. Lots of wonderful activities you can do to strengthen their abilities. Then we're looking at social and environmental responsibility. If you look at what's happening in our context now, where even the Western Cape government is now realizing that we've got to look at our waste management. And this is what comes up in environmental health and responsibility. We're looking at natural disasters. One of the questions in the exam paper this year was looking at the floods and how it affected certain communities. Very topical, but important that our learners should be speaking about it. And unfortunately, these things are not discussed in the homes, but you as the life orientation teacher must have your finger on the pulse of happenings, not only locally, but also nationally and globally, so that our life orientation people have the ability to share and talk about things happening throughout the world, and in that way also change their way of seeing the world and seeing their own environments and themselves. Then we look at democracy and human rights, a very important component of where we're at. We are struggling with democracy because people do not understand the concept and it's not implemented in the way it should. But this is where you come in. We have discussions, debates. And remember, it's not just about you, it's about that individual child and what they bring into the equation and how we basically guide each other, because we come from different worlds, from different cultures, from different religions. And therefore, I cannot go in there as a life orientation with my perspective of the world. I've got to open it up and take in those perspectives of all the individuals in my classroom, and in that way strengthen my own way of seeing a world, but also influencing them to guide and support each other in understanding, and hopefully through understanding, becoming more tolerant of each other. And this is where we're guiding you when we teach life orientation, to prepare you for a better society and in our diverse context so that we can function optimally. Very important concept, which is also now being started, careers and career human rights. Careers and career guidance is also now going in all schools now in the Western Cape. We're starting career clubs, where you will be the instrumental figure in that, getting that club off the ground, where the learners will now go out, like your RCLs, preparing themselves, learning more about careers, and with your guidance, they will be able to guide the other learners at the school should they want to go in different careers. Of course, physical education. We all know the condition of our children these days because they all sit with their computer games and in front of the computer. Nobody's doing exercises, nobody's being physical, and therefore we have this whole thing of childhood obesity, which leads to diabetes and all of these things. And this is also where you come in to guide the individual to say that we've got to take cognizance of our physical health, movement, dancing, all of these sort of things. You as a life orientation teacher will be able to inculcate into your learners. So it's not a boring subject because there's so many different components which are going to be curtailed hopefully in the future, but it gives you that opportunity to open up. You're not stuck with maths, but you've got a diverse array of concepts and content that you've got to share with your learners, which makes it such an exciting and wonderful subject to teach. Effective allo teachers. We look at the behavior and challenges of our learners, like I said, in the classroom, but also within the context of their communities. And if you're not going to open yourself to the context of the communities, your lessons will be very, very, I would say, it won't be as exciting and as dynamic as you would expect it to be, because all the different aspects, you must be able to take that on board and work with the learners. Then we also look at, like I spoke about this, how do we weave the learner's context into the unfolding of this wonderful curriculum we have? And this is also something which you can't do on your own. And I always say my source of reference are my learners in front of me, because they bring the context of their culture, their religion, their language, and they educate me as well as educating others. Then we've got to reach our learners with their challenges and we'll make that difference. And the difference we need to make is so that we can prepare the learners to fit into this wonderful nation of ours, so that we can all become tolerant of each other, that we can respect each other, and in so doing build a better society for the South Africa that we all would love to be. So I wish you all well, should you all become life orientation teachers and look at this wonderful opportunities to learn, but also to share and take your learners into where we should be and where we would like them to. I thank you all for listening, and I would like to introduce you now to the next speaker, which is Naude.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much, Dr. Frederick. I think we could all learn something from what you've just said now. Thank you for that. Yeah, I am Megan Naude. I'm an educational psychologist currently in private practice. And I'm just going to talk to you a little bit about how I got to where I am today. As many of you, I'm sure, is interested in the educational psychology field and how to get there. Yeah, just to start off with the academic road to psychology and educational psychology specifically. In my own personal experience, I started off with doing a bachelor's, majoring in psychology and education. And then I went on to do my honors in educational psychology at the University of Pretoria. And I did my master's degree in educational psychology at the University of Pretoria as well. I think important just to note is one of the things that we really encourage when somebody wants to go into the educational psychology field is really to get as much experience working in and surrounded by an educational setting. Teaching is an incredible way to get that experience. Myself, my mom was a teacher, and I spent a lot of time in a school, also just being surrounded by that educational setting and exposing myself as much as possible to various educational contexts, which I'll talk about in the next slide. In terms of working experience, as I mentioned, obviously the academics and the road towards becoming an educational psychologist is a lengthy one. There's a lot to it, but working experience, I think, is one of the things that's most important, and especially when we look at selection, the universities generally want to select students who have experience either in an educational setting, have life experience. And so it's very important throughout your studies to try and expose yourself as much as possible to various opportunities. So things like tutoring or peering. During my honors year, I got involved in a lot of community projects, worked at the Desmond Tutu Home of Safety, and did a lot of group work with some of the children there. During my master's studies, I did work as a counselor while doing my master's, which was tough, but it's definitely helped me gain experience and helped me understand and give context to what I was studying. So that's also something that's very important. And then in terms of my post-graduation experience, I did my master's internship at the Gauteng Department of Education, so for government. And I also then went on to work at Northland College, which is a TVET college, as a counselor, and then moved on to work for the Western Cape Education Department on the Provincial Autism Outreach Team, where I spent 5 years working for government. And I opened my private practice shortly after that. Working in government and working in the private sector is very different. And I would recommend, again, to just get as much exposure and experience in these different settings as possible, so that you can kind of understand where your interests lie and where you would see yourself going. Getting experience, for example, in a government setting gave me a lot of context and a lot of experience to understand the education system and how things work in terms of supporting learners with barriers to learning, special needs, and also just in general how policies and procedures work. And it's also a very meaningful way to kind of get a very valuable experience and to give back. And then, as I mentioned before, selection can be very tough. Resilience is the most important thing. The master's selection process, as many of you would know, or who are interested in educational psychology, is quite difficult. And they do select only a few students per year. Although, as I said, it's not necessarily age that's the biggest factor. I was quite young when I got into the master's program, but I had a lot of life experience. So had been through things myself, had gone through some difficult experiences, and Emotionally, I think that is one of the things that is most important, is that I think the panel often looks for whether you're emotionally ready to take on the experience of becoming a psychologist, because as Dr. Frederick mentioned previously, it can be quite difficult as a psychologist or in a profession where you're helping people. You really have to be quite strong to be able to put your own things aside and really just focus on the client, and also have really good insight into yourself and your triggers, as you mentioned. So that I would say is one of the most important things. There were various different students from different ages. We had some students who were in their 50s and 40s. I was still in my 20s. So again, like I said, experience and emotional readiness is very important. And then just to keep in mind that these challenges and the process of becoming an educational psychologist really helps you to grow, and it's something that you need to embrace as it builds that resilience which you really depend on when you are a psychologist. So yeah, that's some of the most important things I would say to take away from the experience studying. And then just things to keep in mind as you're going through the process. I would say one of the most important things is really to draw on your support system as much as possible. Family, and I think even in the master selection process, this is something that comes up and that they sometimes even question you about, is what is your support system like? So if you are interested in going into the educational psychology field and you want to do your master's, that's something that you need to already kind of start working on in terms of having a really strong foundational support system. And that can be through obviously relationships, family and friends. It can also be through things like hobbies, things that make you feel good, that fills your cup. As going through the master's process or even doing your honors, it can be quite taxing. So you need to have things in place that is really going to ground you and really going to help you to, like I said, fill your cup. So to really just draw on your support system as much as possible. Your mini dissertation or dissertation, if you are going to do honors and masters, can be quite challenging, and it is very time consuming. You will spend a lot of time writing, and so one of the things I would always recommend is just choosing a topic that you find interesting. Sometimes, at the different universities, they've got different processes with regards to selecting a topic. But they do generally allow you to kind of choose towards a field or to work with a lecturer in the topic that you're more interested in. So that's really something that's important, that you're going to take that through. And many of the students will take their dissertation even into their internship year, depending on how quickly they work through it. And so it can take up to 3 years to completely finish your master's degree. And so choosing a topic that you find interesting is very important. And then also just remembering that's a season in your life. It's not going to continue forever. As I said, there's a lot that you can learn from it, and it's really important to take as much as you can from the experience. But also just keeping in mind that you aren't going to be studying forever and ever. Obviously, you would like to continue improving yourself, in terms of learning and development. As a psychologist, you're constantly going to update yourself with current research, etc. Although the master's process specifically is extremely demanding, especially if you are working or you've got a family and you're doing other things as well, then it can be very taxing. So just remembering that it's a season and you will get through it, and perseverance and resilience is the most important thing. And then lastly, just to talk a little bit about what it looks like to be an educational psychologist. Again, it really depends on your setting, and the incredible thing about educational psychology is you can really explore different avenues depending on your interest. Many psychologists, for example, Dr. Frederick earlier mentioned about career guidance and counseling. Many educational psychologists, for example, would choose to go into that field and focus on that. Others will just focus on psychoeducational assessments and assessing learners with barriers to learning, or therapy. There's really many different avenues which you can take, which is one of the incredible things about studying educational psychology. And like I said, working in a government setting versus a private is very different. So exploring both options, maybe getting experience in both so that you can see what you enjoy most is I would say, most important. And then deciding how you would like to specialize. For myself, as I said, I worked on the autism outreach team for 5 years. I worked a lot with autism and learners with neurodevelopmental disorders. And I gained a lot of experience and really enjoyed that. I'm currently now focused on a bigger variety of things. And my typical day looks like assessing various learners with, for example, ADHD, dyslexia, and autism, doing school readiness assessments and therapy as well. You can also go into training, so you can working with teachers, working with parents to really capacitate and help grow them as well, to support the children better. And as I said, it's really something that you can branch out, and you can decide what you would like to do. So working government versus then private, it looks quite different, but the experience is valuable regardless. Okay, I hope that just gives a very brief outline of what typically I would do. I'm now going to hand over to Ms. Sarah Capstick-Dale to take over from here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Megan. Hi, everybody. I'm going to talk to you a little bit more about my teaching career and sort of what my life looked like after PGCE. And as Ms. Peters said at the beginning, I did my PGCE at UCT in 2006. I completed it, and my subjects were English and history. But I thought I might just tell you first why I actually chose to do a PGCE, because maybe some of you are also wondering that. And honestly, I didn't ever think I would be a teacher. I didn't grow up, playing teacher as a child, and it wasn't necessarily a dream of mine. I did a BA in English and history, and English and film and media studies, but I didn't feel quite ready for the working world. I didn't have enough confidence to go out there and sort of sell myself. And I was really lucky in that I could actually stay at university for another year. And I decided to do a PGCE because I thought, well, you know what? I love English, I love literature, and I'll always get a job as a teacher. Someone always needs a teacher somewhere. And it was never really my plan to take it on full time. But when I did my teaching practical, my first teaching practical was at Rylands High School, which is in Athlone in Cape Town. And I just fell in love with it. I really did. Watching kids react positively to lessons that you're giving them, seeing them struggle and then suddenly have a light bulb moment, it was really rewarding. And so I realized that I did want to carry on being a teacher. So just the fact that I did the PGCE really solidified that for me. In my journey, I've worked at quite a few different schools, but I've also done other things. And currently I'm not working in a school. So just a rundown there, I've worked at Camps Bay High School, in media, Rustenburg High School, and I'm also taught in North Carolina, the US, and then at Good Hope Seminary, which is in Gardens in Cape Town, and now I'm an editor. I thought I would just run you through each of point in my career and what was challenging about it, what I learned through it, and hopefully it's something that you can think about if you want to experience these kinds of things. So being a first-year teacher, you really do function on adrenaline. It is very difficult being, the newbie. And also I was 22 when I was teaching 18-year-olds, so I found that quite tricky. Camps Bay is a fantastic school, but it does have its challenges, just like any school. The skills that I learned, you have to learn classroom management and planning. And classroom management, while you have the experiences on your teaching practical, it's not quite the same as being in a classroom and being the teacher as opposed to being the student teacher. One of the best things about teaching at Camps Bay High School was the camaraderie I experienced between other young teachers and older teachers and me. It really is important that when you start teaching, that you build those relationships, you find a mentor. I was really lucky to work with a teacher who had been there not there, but had been teaching for 30 years or so. And she actually started the same year as me, and she was just an incredible influence in my life. And some of the young teachers I worked with are still my friends today as well. So it's really important when you go into teaching that you are ready to build relationships. You want to build relationships with people. But teaching, I still had that sort of yearning to go and work in media because I hadn't given it a go. And so I left at the end of 2010 and I went to work at Ramsey Media. I worked at Getaway magazine for a while, and then I moved to a different section of the business, which did things like Toyota magazine. The difference working in a school and in a corporate environment is just, it's very hard to explain how different they are. For one thing, you can go to the bathroom when you want to, when you work in the corporate environment, but also you're dealing with people in a very different way. Instead of phone calls to parents and dealing a lot of with people one-on-one, I was doing a lot of administrative tasks, and I was dealing with people through email and through phone calls, which was a whole nother skill that I learned. In terms of job satisfaction, though, it really was a great experience. I loved how different it was and meeting, all the graphic designers and that kind of thing. It also had its challenges. Every job has its challenges. Learning how to work in a different environment was difficult. I learned how to become a sub-editor, which is when I moved up, which was, to me, very interesting. That's what I really wanted to do. Unfortunately, though, I found that working in the corporate environment was rather boring compared to being a teacher. Even though I was working with fantastic people, I was able to actually also go on some trips when I worked for Getaway magazine. But it wasn't the same as teaching. Teaching has that draw of that every day is different. Even when you are teaching the same curriculum year after year, it's the students that make it different. And that, to me, was really important. So I left Ramsey Media and I went to Rustenburg Girls High School, which is also in Cape Town. This is a very different school to Camps Bay. One of the reasons being that it's an all-girls school, but also that it has very different pressures. So you will find in your teaching career, every school has challenges, but every school has a different context and different pressures that come with that context. One of the things about Rustenburg is that it's sort of seen as an elite school, even though it is a government school. And with that came a lot of pressure from parents and watching students put a lot of pressure on themselves, which is where life orientation and educational psychology really do come into the fore. A lot of the students, they didn't struggle with difficult circumstances at home, but they struggled a lot with anxiety and depression and those kinds of things. And as a teacher, even though my subject was English, you become a shoulder to cry on. People want to let off steam and talk to you, and you become much more than a teacher, which is a good and a difficult thing. At Rustenburg, I also had the chance to sort of develop my career as a teacher. Don't let anyone tell you that teaching is just a job. It's not. It's a real career. And there's so much growth that you can go through. my growth went from, I became the head of the grade 8 year, meaning that I was in charge of all the disciplinary, academic, and pastoral needs of 180 students. Plus, I learned how to manage people, which was very important for me. And I also joined the school governing body. If you ever are in a position in which you can join a school governing body, I would really recommend it. This fits into not only my career development, but also my job satisfaction, because the governing body essentially runs the school and makes the policies and all of those kinds of things that really affect the day-to-day life at the school, and being able to see the inner workings of that and to feel like I had agency in that and making a difference to the life of our school was really, really important to me. And I think for many people who enter teaching, you don't just want to go and teach your subject and go home. You actually want to make a difference. And this was a nice way for me to make a larger difference rather than just in individual students' lives. From Rustenburg, my husband and I decided to move to the United States. And one of the great things about teaching, and after you've done your PGCE and you begin teaching, you'll realize that it really opens the world up to you. You can teach all over the world with many, many subjects. English is particularly a good one to teach internationally with. And I know many people who've had fantastic experiences learning different cultures, learning different languages, and really just enjoying being far away and experiencing a different kind of life. I'm not one of those people. I really, really struggled overseas. It was extremely challenging for me. I went to the United States kind of thinking that, oh, I grew up watching American media, listening to American music. How different can it be? And it was extremely, extremely hard. From the behavior to the students, to the different approach to teaching, to the focus on standardized testing and multiple choice testing, even in English, I found it very, very tricky. Not just tricky, I found it very difficult. And so there was intense planning that went into it, intense introspection. And it was mentioned earlier, but introspection is really an important part of becoming a teacher. You can't be a good teacher without being reflective on your practice, but also on where you are in your life. I did learn a lot of skills, however, but mostly I learned about myself. And we decided to come home in 2020, but we couldn't get home just yet. So we had to come home in December 2020. And that's when I went to Good Hope Seminary, which is in Gardens in Cape Town. And again, a very different context to Rustenburg and to Camps Bay High School. Post-COVID teaching is very different from pre-COVID teaching, just in terms of where the students are at and the different levels that you will find in your classes. And so it does take another kind of agility to become a really good post-COVID teacher. And it probably will take that for the next couple of years until the younger students who have the full educational experience come up. But that's not to say you shouldn't do it, because it is so important. I did have a few challenges there. I also had some wonderful times. I went to my past grade 11's valedictory a couple of weeks ago, and the relationships that I built with students at that school are extremely special. And relationships should be your focus throughout your teaching career, with the students and with your fellow teachers and with parents, because it makes all the difference in the world. But I decided I needed a career change, and this is really where I wanted to get to. And I moved to work as an editor, an educational editor at Learning Sandbox, which is an online educational content creator, mostly in science, strangely, because I'm not very gifted at science, but I've learned a lot. And in looking for this new job, I realized that teachers really struggle to put themselves forward and say, this is what I'm good at, these are my skills. I think because it's a profession where you serve, it's very hard to go, I can do other things. And the message that I want to give you is that when you become a teacher, you have so many skills that are also transferable. Megan Naude mentioned that this is a season of your life. And going into a PGCE, I think it's also important that you know you're not necessarily going to be a teacher for the next 40 years, like the previous generation of teachers. The world is not like that anymore. But it's hard to leave a profession that so many people think they understand, but they don't. And not feeling confident in yourself. And I've put on the screen here just some of the really important skills that you have as a teacher that you might not even realize. And they're brilliant transferable skills. You can put them on any CV and you can do so many things with them. I've got their communication, time management, quick decision making is one that people forget. I once read that neurosurgeons make fewer decisions every day than teachers do, which I think is very true. Long-term planning as well as short-term planning. You have to be able to see the bigger picture as a teacher. You have no choice but to be detail-oriented, and you have to be patient. Even if you think that you are not an extremely patient person in the classroom, when you leave the classroom, you realize how patient you are compared to other people. And that will stand you in good stead for the rest of your life. And of course, the administrative abilities. Unfortunately, there is a lot of paperwork that goes with teaching, but it is still an extremely valuable skill for later in life. So I've kind of rushed you through a 15-year career of teaching and doing various other things, hopefully to encourage you that taking up teaching is a fantastic thing to do. It will be difficult, it will be wonderful, but it's also not the end of the road. It will prepare you for so much else in life. And so thank you very much for listening to that. I'm now going to pass you on to Marion Erskine. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Sarah. I'm so sorry you had the hard job of introducing my strange name and last name. It's an icebreaker at any party. Bonjour, everyone. I'm coming live from France. It's such an honor to join you all there in South Africa. I love hearing your accent. It's lovely this side of the world. And thank you so much for the opportunity that I can tell you a little bit about my 25-year career and how I went from Nouns to nuclear. Now, I'm very interactive, so I need you to grab a pen or pencil or something nearby to scribble on. And I want you to do a little icebreaker for me. While I tell you a story, I want you to write down one of the things that's still on your bucket list. And you don't have to think too big, like I want to go to the moon or visit every continent on the earth or anything. Start small, but write down one thing that you still really want to do before you kick the bucket one day. So while you're doing that, let me tell you a little bit about my history. While I grew up in South Africa, I grew up in a very small little mining town in Gauteng, and we were taught not to think too big, to dream too big. I hear about amazing teachers and inspiring teachers, and unfortunately, I did not have many of those. Our teachers often just told us, don't think big, don't dream big. So what happened is one day, I remember this like yesterday, in the 9th grade, my teacher asked us, where do you see yourself at the age of 25? And everybody scribbled down and shared their dreams. And most of them sounded something similar to, I would like to own a house. I want to get married. I want to have a pet. I want to, maybe have a baby or two. And although those things are beautiful and nice to dream of, I was the only one in the class that said, I want to walk on the Great Wall of China by the age of 25. And guess what? I just told you about the community that I grew up in. Everybody in the classroom laughed at me, including my teacher. And they told me to get my head out of the clouds, to get a little job in the mining community and not dream too big. All right, so it did hurt. But I just realized then and there I was really different than everyone else around me. All right, let's go to the next one. So as I'm telling you some stories, in my final year in matric, one of the teachers called me in, and she looked very concerned, and she said to me, "Ooh, Marion, I see you applied to go to the Northwest University to study teaching." I said, "Yes, ma'am. I want to be a teacher. I want to make a difference. I want to change lives." So she looked very worried, and I said to her, "What's going on?" She said, "I don't really know how to share this information with you." I said, "No, but please just tell me. It's like, what could be that bad?" She said, "Darling, we had you tested and your IQ is not high enough to go to university. Why don't you just, get a normal job? I don't want you to be disappointed." I was very shocked because I was never the brightest kid in the class, but I passed my subjects, and I'm like, my IQ was too low for university. What a bummer. Anyway, I told the teacher, "Listen, this is then a challenge. I will go and try and get my degree." And I went to university, and I passed my degree and my PGCE with cum laude, and I was the best subject didactic student at the university that year. And not too bad for somebody with a low IQ, I always tell people. So yeah, I got this wonderful education now. I was going to change South Africa. I was going to be the best teacher possible out there. And I was, the world was my oyster. I was so excited. Unfortunately, life happened to me. I got a job as a teacher, and I earned a massive gross salary of 3,000 Rand per month from one of the schools that I worked in. And I did not really have money to survive because at that stage, my dad got prostate cancer, and he became very, very ill. Dad also worked for himself, so he did not have any, a company or something that could help. The medical aid was depleted, and there was just nothing. So I had to take care of Dad, my mom, my gran, with 3,000 Rand a month salary. And the picture in the middle over here is a picture of my car. Well, it was a picture of my car because during that time, they also stole my vehicle, and I had no way of getting to school anymore. I had to hitchhike to school where 60 students waited for me. I was teaching English as a first, second, and third language in a classroom. And I had no money, and I was at a very, very, very low part of my life. I had these dreams that I'm going to make the world a better place, that I'm going to change the world. And here I did not have more money than to survive with one meal per day. That's all we had at that stage. All right, but this is now the end of the drama and the sadness of this presentation. So I'm going to take you to the rest. While I was working at the school, I was desperate for money, and my dad did pass away, unfortunately, during that time. And I heard about an opportunity to go and work on the cruise ships to become a waiter over there. So I applied, and about 6 months, 9 months later, I heard that they have an opportunity for me to go and work on one of the largest cruise ships. I had to borrow some money to get a ticket to get to the States, and I worked on one of the biggest cruise ships then, 4,000 guests, 1,200 members. It was just really amazing. And I told them I'm really good at waitering, but unfortunately, I was just really average. However, with my personality, I managed to secure a few tips over there. While I was there, I noticed that their teaching material was pretty bad on the cruise ship, and it was not up to par. The grammar was all over the place. So I offered, and I said, "Can I help you improve your material? Can I bring in a little bit of my teaching experience?" And I did. And I changed all their teaching material, and I made it more interactive, and they loved it. They came to me for slogans and seasonal ideas, like, "What should we do, Marion? We want to have a Christmas party. What can be a catchy slogan?" I helped them with that. And a lot of the people that worked on the cruise ships were from non-English speaking countries, many from Africa, from Turkey, the Far East. And I started teaching them English for free. And I improved the English, and I loved it because now I could use my teaching background and actually make everyone on the cruise ship better. They loved me so much, they wanted me to stay. But for me, I wanted to get back to a classroom. And I said, no, I want to go back. But something happened on this cruise ship. I wanted to travel. I just wanted to travel more of the world. I saw Mexico, the Caribbean, and I just fell in love with traveling. So while I was on the cruise ship, I also heard about the possibility to go and teach in the Far East. You might know people that have been to China, Taiwan, and Korea, for example. So I applied and I got a job, and as I was a qualified high school teacher, and they told me, Marion, you are going to teach kindergarten. And I had 3-year-olds and 4-year-olds sitting on my lap, and I had to teach them 5 little monkeys jumping on the bed, and I don't know what else. So I had to almost reteach myself. So in the morning, I did kindergarten, but I loved it. And in the afternoon, then I taught the grown kids. During this time, it was very difficult in Taiwan that time. There was not a street sign that was in English. Everything outside of the school was in Mandarin. So I decided I'm going to learn Mandarin as well, because it's going to help me teach. If I learn the grammar of Chinese, then maybe I can also teach English better. And by saying, in your language, you have this, but in our language, this is how we do it. And it really did help. Because of my creativity, my boss realized that all the kids wanted to be in my class. The parents wanted to put the kids in the class because they loved learning. We had a lot of fun. And she asked me to become a teacher trainer. So at the age of 23, I already started training other teachers. I went to other schools. I worked with the principals, the leadership of the school, and something also stirred in that category for me. With the leadership, I started coaching them, and I said, how can you be a better leader? How can you run the school better? And people just enjoyed that. Also in this time, I wrote my very first 2 books, Oos, that was published in South Africa, and then Aphrodisiac, that was published in Taiwan, talking about how crazy the Western and the Eastern cultures are. And that was another dream of mine that realized as I was over there. All right, next, I went to Abu Dhabi. I was headhunted, so you will hear many people will tell you it's very important to build connections, make sure people know what you do. So I was headhunted by the United Arab Emirates, and they said to me, listen, we have a school reformation project, a national project where we need you to come and teach our Arabic teachers how to be better teachers. When I got there, I was so surprised. The kids were still sitting in rows. The teacher was talking 95% of the time, and they were doing page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4. They did not know about the concept of critical thinking, group work, let the kids teach you something. There was nothing like that. So I started using my skills that I had then, but I also had to adapt to this new environment, again, learning a little bit of the Arabic culture. And I absolutely loved it. I made a lot of the curriculum more fun, more engaging, and the English in the schools just improved drastically. And again, I was asked to go to other schools and reteach what I taught my school. During this time, like Sarah, I also decided to move into corporate. I went to work for Emirates Airline. If you must be aware of the airline. There, I started teaching adults. And I think, as Sarah was explaining to you, I think children are easier to teach than adults are, because adults are very set in their ways. But there came new challenges. I liked what I did, and it was really exciting. My colleagues really appreciated the creativity that I brought, and they would tell me, this material was marionated by you, right? And it became like a catchphrase, like, hey, if you want something fun or engaging, give it to him. He's going to fix it for you. Also, during that time, I obtained my ID qualification. This is instructional designer. I have had the creativity. I have designed many programs, but now I got an official qualification that made me a qualified instructional designer, and I could now design courses and programs for the whole world out there. Then I went to nuclear. I was headhunted again, a nuclear organization, the very first one in the Arab Emirates contacted me. They said to me, please come and help our leadership team. We want you to design our courses and programs. And I did. I knew nothing about leadership leadership, nuclear. I knew nothing about the topic. I didn't know how the reactors worked. All I knew is that South Africa had Coburg, and that was about it. So I had to go and study nuclear because I needed to understand their world before I teach them my world. Again, I marionated, and then I created lots of interesting things over there, for like programs for them, hands-on activities. And the people in nuclear are very set in their ways. They like black and white. They like point A, point B, point C. So I made them play games. I made them have fun, and they absolutely loved it. And my programs got international recommendations in the nuclear world. Okay, and then last but not the least, something that I really loved hearing from Dr. Sylvester, Megan, and Sarah is they're all talking about how you should stay connected, how you should have a passion for people, and all of this. So I want to share my pulse check compass with you. This is something I've been using for the last 25 odd years of my life, and this is what made me do what you just saw me do. First of all, I do regular self-assessment every 6 months. I do not say, like other people, what's your 5-year plan? I don't have a 5-year plan. I have a 6-month plan. I say, in the next 6 months, this is what I want to achieve. What do I need to achieve that? Where can I go to next? Am I happy here? Do I want to go to the next one? What can I do? So every 6 months, I did a pulse check. And that's why I think my career got catapulted as it did. Then the other thing is set clear goals. Maybe by now you are familiar with the SMART goals. If you're not familiar, you can go Google them, but be very specific, measurable goals and say, I want to have this by this time. I want to have so much and I have to have that. If you're very clear with your goals and set targets and timelines, you can achieve these things. Then the other thing, I think Megan especially talked about this continuous learning. You can never, ever stop learning. As a teacher, as an educator, keep up with what's going on in the world and keep improving yourself. That's one of the secrets to where how I got to my success today. And then last but not the least, network and relationship building. LinkedIn is out there, but you are joining this webinar right now. You are connecting with people. Make sure you never know who is in this room that can maybe open a door for you one day. So make sure that you spend time building networks and your relationships. All right. And last but not the least, I wanted to tell you, remember the Great Wall of China? So I did walk on that Great Wall of China at the age of 26. And I stood on that structure and I said to myself, you know what? Never, ever allow people to tell you you shouldn't live your dreams or you should take your head out of the clouds. You can do anything that you set your mind to. And my last words for all of you is, you are teachers, or you are going to be teachers. What a privilege, what an absolute privilege that you can change someone in front of you every day and make them a little bit version of themselves. What else is there in the world than to improve someone else? So this is what I would like to have shared with all of you. And I'm going to hand over now to Dr. Naidoo, and he's going to tell you a little bit about the postgraduate certification in education. Thank you very much, everybody.
Good evening, everybody. And thank you, Marion. Thank you, people, for making time to join this webinar. My focus is on the PGCE of 2024. I am the head of PGCE at SACAP, and we have developed a beautiful program. You would have realized that the previous 4 speakers, throughout their presentations, clearly there is a thread. And that thread is one of a focus on psychosocial strength, being strong mentally, emotionally. Now that aligns to the vision of SACAP, because SACAP's vision is to contribute to the psychosocial development of individuals so that they can coexist in healthy relationships with one another, and in that way build healthy families, healthy communities, and a peaceful and harmonious society. So as I take you through the PGCE, you will notice that there's a big focus on the psychosocial support of learners. The PGCE includes the core subject specialization of life orientation, and that speaks to psychosocial support of learners. And another chosen elective that is either English or geography. So life orientation is the compulsory one, and you can choose between English and geography. The program also includes the compulsory learning support specialization of guidance counseling and specialized learning support. That helps with identifying learning disabilities, and it helps to promote inclusive education. So this program is actually ideal for graduates who want to apply their subject knowledge, for example, in English or geography, but at the same time also want to offer learners psychosocial support, which is seriously lacking in mainstream schools. The SACAP's PGCE is accredited by the Council for Higher Education, and it is registered on the National Qualifications Framework by SACWA, the South African Qualifications Authority. It's registered as a NQAP Level 7 qualification, which is equivalent to a B.Ed. It's a professional vocational program that is also recognized by the DHET, that is the Department of Higher Education and Training. And the PGCE actually is designed to complement an undergraduate degree, such as a BA degree, a BCom, a BSc degree. And once you take your undergraduate degree, in conjunction with the PGCE, it's on par with a B.Ed. The subject specialization modules have been developed by subject specialists. When I say subject specialization modules, I'm referring to the LO, the life orientation, the English, and the geography. They have been designed, all three modules have been designed by subject specialists, and these are educators, teachers each with more than 30 years experience of teaching, and a large part of that experience is as subject advisors, where they are stationed at district offices and they support schools and they support educators in their respective subjects. The modules are designed to equip graduates to mediate and facilitate curriculum, content effectively, and promote inclusivity and build critical, innovative thinking skills. You know, you would understand that your undergraduate qualification is where you acquire the content. So the PGCE, besides the foundational modules such as history and philosophy of education, educational psychology, and so on, other than that, the focus is mostly on the actual teaching methodologies. And therefore, you find that you also need to go and implement those teaching methodologies, and you do that when you go on practice teaching for 8 weeks in total, 2 stints of 4 weeks each. At SACAP, we are big on student support. Each campus has a PGCE program coordinator. The program coordinator works very closely with the educators, with the program head, with other arms of the institution to ensure that the program, rolls out as it's supposed to. So the PGCE coordinator also arranges for the placement of students for the teaching practice, that is the work integrated learning. We have, as SACAP, started to build a network of schools, and students will be invited to choose from those schools to do their practice teaching. Alternatively, they can provide the names of schools that they prefer to be placed at, and SACAP will then approach those schools. The program coordinators also convene regular student feedback sessions and arrange joint inter-campus workshops. The feedback sessions are very important because we are able to then take the issues of concern from the students and attend to those issues, or put systems in place that will mitigate issues that they may be experiencing. The student support and development teams are also available to provide students with support to address any academic challenges they may be experiencing. There is a whole team on each campus that makes up the student support department, and they are there to assist students with any of the academic challenges they are experiencing. SACAP also commits to small classes, and in that way, you can get personalized attention, and there's more interaction, there's more support, and it's a more interactive learning environment. The admission requirements, there is no grade point average requirement. As long as you passed your undergraduate qualification, you have the undergraduate qualification. The focus then is on, do you have modules that will enable you to teach subjects like life orientation, English, and geography. To teach life orientation, you need to have psychology minimum up to second year level. Alternatively, if you have sociology, philosophy, political science, human science, labor studies, industrial studies, and there's a host of other related human and social sciences qualifications. If you have any of those up to second or third year level, then psychology 1 will suffice. You will still qualify. For English, a similar thing applies. You need English 2, English up to second year level. Alternatively, you may, if you have English at first year level and you have other language associated modules such as applied English, language studies, African literature, linguistics, literary theory, communication, and or media studies, even journalism, whatever other modules you may have done that are related to the teaching of English. With geography, also the minimum is second year geography up to second year level, and you get lots of other modules that are associated with geography, climatology, environmental studies, and so on. So we will look at the qualification, your undergraduate qualification in its entirety. And we may even ask for the module descriptors of some of the modules that you may have done, just to get an idea of the amount of content, school, or the subject content that's embedded in those modules that will enable you to then specialize in that subject. The last slide is special circumstances. Undergraduate qualifications that do not meet the minimum requirements will need to be considered in its entirety. I've explained that to you. Excuse me. The extent to which academic content is embedded in the degree or diploma related to a particular subject, whether that is sufficient to teach that subject, that needs to be determined. And sometimes for that to happen, we may need to ask for the module descriptors for those particular modules. Applicants above 24 years of age and who are 24 years in age and older and who do not meet the above requirements may apply for admission into the program on the basis of recognition of prior learning. You will need to contact the university, and the university then will, the admissions team will then explain to you how to go about applying for recognition of prior learning. My apologies for that. So I've come to the end, and if you have any other questions, you are free to contact the college and speak to the admissions staff. And thank you, Dawn.
Wow, wow, wow. What a journey from all of our panelists. And I want to say thank you for sharing the information with us. If you have any questions, please do pop them into the question box for our live answer session that will be happening right now. Dr. Naidoo, we have a question from one of our attendees. The question reads as follows. If I do a PGCE in FET or senior phase, can I teach foundation or intermediate phase? Can you please answer that question for us, Dr. Naidoo?
Thank you, Don. The department is becoming increasingly stricter on educators teaching in the learning areas and the phase that they have been trained to teach. So I would not advise that. If you want to teach in the foundation phase or the intermediate phase, then do a PGCE for foundation phase or a PGCE for intermediate phase. In the long term, it's not advisable. It also impacts on your promotion prospects.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Naidoo. Megan, we have a question that one of our attendees wants to know: how will PGCE benefit me in an educational psychology field?
Hi, Dawn. Yes, so I think the PGCE will definitely benefit. I did type an answer as well, but I think a lot of the universities' master's programs, as part of the selection criteria, would require you to either have a honors degree, a B.Ed honors degree, or a PGCE to get into the program. So I'm not speaking for any specific university, but various universities do require you to have either one of those. And I think it will also just provides a really good foundational start, knowledge, and will give you the experience, I think, that will really benefit you in terms of the field of educational psychology. Even though there's a lot of emphasis on the psychology, there's a massive, massive part of it is education, learning and development. So having that experience in the educational field and doing a PGC will 100% benefit.
Okay, and Megan, I think there's another question for you. And the question reads as follows: how do I transition from a PGCE to neurodevelopment teaching field? What steps should I take?
Okay, so I think there are various avenues, but you could go into a position, for example, as a learning support teacher. In governments, there are positions, learning support teacher positions, where you go in and you go and support learners with specific learning needs. And so I would say it depends on the setting you'd go into, but you could definitely take your PGCE, and if you wanted to continue, maybe you could do an honors in inclusive education as well after the PGCE, but you could definitely take that knowledge and apply it to, say, for example, go into a learning support teacher position. And if you are specifically interested in the neurodevelopmental field, so for example, I worked on the autism outreach team, and we worked in a transdisciplinary team where there was a psychologist, a speech therapist, an occupational therapist, and a learning support teacher. So the learning support teacher, there was a few that was working on the team that we were, and many of them did have their PGCs as well. So that's something that you could look at, and that was obviously quite specialized, focused on autism. But as I said, experience is important there as well.
Thank you, Megan. We appreciate bringing your knowledge to the table. Is there one more question? Currently, the question is, do we offer distance learning? Unfortunately, SACAP at the moment do not offer distance learning. We only have campuses in Cape Town and Johannesburg. We are working towards in the future for having PGC online. Another question for you, Megan. Can I work with students with learning disabilities, autism, ADHD, and how long is the PGCE?
Okay, so I'm not going to answer how long, but I will say that, yes, like I said, if you've done your PGCE and you want to go into a role where you specifically work, for example, with children with autism, ADHD, and that kind of thing, you could do that. As I said, you can step into a learning, the best would probably be to step into a learning support teacher position, although I'm sure there are many other paths and jobs which you could also look at. But it is something that you can look at. Obviously, you would have to put your feelers out and really look at which opportunities and jobs there are out there. But as I've said, for example, on the team that I worked for, which was the Western Cape Department of Education, autism outreach team, there was teachers, learning support teachers who had PGCE qualifications. Many of them had done some work or had a bit of experience working in special needs schools, for example. So that could be a very good step, is after your PGCE to step into a special needs teaching position if you're very interested in that, and then work move across depending on what your interests are.
Thank you, Megan. I can answer how long the PGCE is. Normally, PGCE is after you graduated, so it normally is 1 year. Ladies and gentlemen, I think we came to the end of our live Q&A. Please, if you have any other questions, feel free to contact us. Leave your email address in the chat box and we will get back to you. Please do follow us on our various social media channels to stay up to date on upcoming events, program launches, and updates, and to see the recording to this webinar. We thank you for your attendance, and we thank our panelists for joining us this evening. We hope you have a wonderful night further. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Good night.